Where'd this baby come from?
It's mine!
Can't be.
She came off as a normal country girl.
Somebody that you could kick it off with, quick like, you know.
Her whole mission in life was to be the pretty girl that caught the eye of a guy.
For a demon like her, hell would be easy.
On the morning of October 9th, 2020, a Texas state trooper noticed a car driving erratically on a highway near the Oklahoma border. He then pulled it over. What he found inside, he would later say, was unlike anything in his career. The driver was a woman. She was covered in dried blood, and she was holding a newborn baby, the umbilical cord still attached. The trooper asked her what had happened. She told him she had just given birth on the side of the road. It is the kind of story that, in the moment, you might believe. A panicked woman, a roadside birth, a newborn in her arms, but almost immediately. Small things did not add up. The trooper called for medical help. The woman and the baby were taken to a hospital in Idabel, Oklahoma. And there, doctors found something that stopped the entire story cold. The woman showed no signs of having recently given birth. None. Not the physical signs. Not the medical signs. Nothing. The baby she was holding was not hers. Her name was Taylor Parker, and to understand how she came to be on that road that morning, covered in another person's blood, holding a baby that did not belong to her, you have to go back, months back, to a pregnancy that never existed, a gender reveal party for a child that was never coming, and a young mother named Reagan, who Taylor Parker had once called a friend. This is The Missing Hour, and this is one of the most difficult cases we have ever covered, not because of what you will see, but because of what it asks you to understand about how far a person will go to protect a lie.
Well, Taylor Parker has been sentenced to death for capital murder. She was found guilty of murdering 21-year-old Reagan Hancock as well as Hancock's unborn baby girl. The Bowie County jury deliberated for an hour and a half before returning the guilty verdict. Now, back in October of 2020, Parker killed the pregnant mother and cut her unborn baby from her womb. Hancock died at the scene. Her baby was pronounced dead at an Oklahoma hospital.
Before we go any further, you need to know who Reagan was, because this case is so often told through Taylor Parker, her lies, her planning, her trial, and the woman at the center of it can get lost. So let's start with her. Reagan Simmons-Hancock was 21 years old. She lived in New Boston, Texas, a small town in the northeast corner of the state, close to the borders of both Arkansas and Oklahoma. The kind of town where people know each other, where families overlap. She was a young mother. She had a daughter, a little girl 3 years old, and in the fall of 2020, Reagan was pregnant again, a second daughter. She and her husband had already chosen a name for the baby they were expecting. By every account from those who knew her, Reagan was warm, generous, the kind of person who made friends easily and kept them. She knew Taylor Parker, not as a stranger, not distantly. They were, by the accounts given at trial, friends. Parker had been part of Reagan's life. Parker had even, at one point, taken photographs for Reagan's family. That detail matters, because it means what happened on October 9th was not a stranger crime. It was not random. It was someone Reagan had let into her life. Reagan was 21 years old. She was a mother. She was about to be a mother again, and she trusted the wrong person. Everything that follows in this story, every lie, every piece of planning, every moment of the investigation and the trial, exists because of what was taken from Reagan Simmons-Hancock and her family on that day. I want you to hold on to who she was as we go forward, because she is the reason this case matters. Taylor Parker was 27 years old in the fall of 2020. She also lived in the New Boston area. She had children of her own, and she was in a relationship, one that, by the accounts presented at trial, mattered to her enormously. The relationship was with a man, and it was, in Parker's mind, the center of her world. There was just one problem. The relationship was, by 2020, on unstable ground, and Parker appears to have believed, rightly or wrongly, that the thing keeping it together, the thing that would keep her partner from leaving, was a baby. So Taylor Parker told him she was pregnant. She was not. This is where the case becomes something more disturbing than a single moment of violence. Because the pregnancy Taylor Parker claimed was not a lie she told once and abandoned. It was a lie she sustained. For months, she told people she was expecting. She let the pregnancy become part of her identity, part of her relationship, part of how the people around her saw her. And as the months passed, the lie required more evidence, more proof, more commitment. A fake pregnancy has a deadline, because eventually there has to be a baby. Prosecutors would later present evidence about just how far Parker went to maintain the illusion, fabricated documentation, a planned gender reveal, the full social performance of an expectant mother. She built an entire false reality, and she lived inside it. There is a question that sits underneath this entire case, and I want to name it directly, because it is the question the trial itself wrestled with. Did Taylor Parker believe her own lie? Was this delusion, or was it calculation? The defense would argue one thing. The prosecution would argue another. And the evidence they presented about what Parker did in the days before October 9th would make that question very hard to answer in Parker's favor. The fake pregnancy had a due date, and as that date approached, Taylor Parker faced the problem that every fake pregnancy eventually creates. There was no baby. What investigators would later establish, through digital evidence, through search history, through testimony, was that in the period leading up to October 9th, Parker had been preparing. A Texas Ranger named Dustin Estes testified at trial about the extent of Parker's research. According to that testimony, Parker had researched extensively how to fake a pregnancy. And more chillingly, she had been looking into the specifics of how a baby develops late in pregnancy. On the day of the killing itself, prosecutors presented evidence that Parker had viewed material related to the physical examination of a preterm infant. I want to be careful here, because this is the part of the case where the facts speak for themselves and do not need embellishment. Taylor Parker had built a lie that required a baby. Reagan Simmons-Hancock was a friend who was, herself, pregnant, due around the same window that Parker's fake pregnancy was due. And Parker knew her, had access to her, was trusted by her. The prosecution's argument was that this was not an impulsive act, that the research, the timing, the fake pregnancy, the targeting of someone whose due date aligned with the lie, all of it pointed to planning, to premeditation. The defense would argue that Parker was not in a rational state, that the same delusion that let her sustain a fake pregnancy for months had driven her to something she could not fully comprehend. The jury would have to decide which of those was true. On October 9th, 2020, Taylor Parker went to Reagan Simmons-Hancock's home in New Boston. Reagan's 3-year-old daughter was in the house, and what happened inside that home ended Reagan's life and the life of the daughter she was carrying, a baby her family had already named Braxlyn. I am not going to walk you through the details of how Reagan died. They were presented at trial. They are part of the public record, and they are among the most disturbing facts I have ever encountered in researching any case. What you need to know is this: it was deliberate, it was brutal, and when it was over, Taylor Parker left that house with Reagan's unborn daughter and got into her car. Reagan's mother would find her. Now we come back to where this story began: the highway, the trooper, the traffic stop. After leaving Reagan's home, Taylor Parker got into her car and drove north, toward the Oklahoma border. She was driving erratically, speeding, and that is what drew the attention of the Texas State Trooper who pulled her over on the morning of October 9th. When he approached the car, he found Parker covered in blood, holding a newborn infant with the umbilical cord still attached. She told him she had given birth on the side of the road. The trooper did what the situation demanded. He called for emergency medical help. Parker and the infant were transported across the border to a hospital in Idabel, Oklahoma. And it was there, in those first hours, that the story began to collapse. Medical staff examined Parker, and they found no evidence that she had recently given birth. There were no physical signs. The account she had given, the roadside birth, the baby being hers, was not physically possible. The infant, Reagan's daughter, Braxlyn, was pronounced dead at the hospital. And meanwhile, back in New Boston, Reagan Simmons-Hancock's mother had arrived at her daughter's home and found her. The two scenes, the hospital in Oklahoma and the home in Texas, connected almost immediately. A woman covered in blood with a newborn that wasn't hers. A young pregnant mother dead in her home, her unborn child gone. It did not take investigators long to understand what had happened. Taylor Parker was taken into custody. She would later admit to a physical altercation with Reagan and to taking the baby, but her account of what happened and her state of mind would become the central battleground of one of the longest and most emotionally devastating trials in recent Texas history. Here's what investigators were left to make sense of. A woman had sustained a fake pregnancy for months. She had researched how to do it. On the day a real baby was needed, a friend, a pregnant friend whose due date aligned with the lie, was killed and her unborn child taken. And yet the defense would argue that Taylor Parker was not a calculating killer, but a profoundly disturbed woman in the grip of a delusion she could not escape. That tension, calculation versus delusion, is what the trial had to resolve. The trial began in 2022 in Bowie County, Texas. It was, by any measure, enormous. The guilt phase, then a sentencing phase that ran for 25 days and featured 142 witnesses. This was not a quick proceeding. The state built an exhaustive case. The prosecution's argument was premeditation. They presented Parker's research. They presented the timeline. They presented the fake pregnancy, the gender reveal, the fabricated evidence, all of it pointing to a woman who had planned, methodically, to take a baby and pass it off as her own. Texas Ranger Dustin Estes testified about the extent of Parker's preparation, the research into faking a pregnancy, and the material she viewed on the very day of the killing. There was also testimony from people who had known Parker, including Reagan's husband, Homer Hancock, who testified that Parker had been, in his words, somewhat of a friend, that she had taken the couple's engagement and wedding photographs. That detail landed in the courtroom the way it lands now. This was someone they had trusted. The defense did not have an easy case to make. They focused on Parker's mental state, arguing that her psychology, her delusions, her grip on reality meant she did not have the culpability the state was claiming. On October 3rd, 2022, the jury reached its verdict. 6 women, 6 men. They deliberated for approximately 90 minutes, guilty of capital murder. But in Texas, a capital murder conviction is only the first half. Next came the question of whether Taylor Parker would live or die. The sentencing phase of Taylor Parker's trial was its own ordeal. 25 days, 142 witnesses. The jury heard everything about Parker, about the crime, about its impact. They heard from Reagan's family. Reagan's mother delivered a victim impact statement that I will not quote in full, but which made unmistakably clear the depth of what this family had lost: a daughter and a granddaughter who never got to live. On November 9th, 2022, the jury returned its sentencing decision. It took them about an hour. death. The judge, John Tidwell, addressed Taylor Parker as the sentence was handed down. His words were brief, 4 of them in essence. Take her to death row. With that, Taylor Parker became one of the small number of women on Texas death row. As of this recording, the state of Texas has only a handful of women under sentence of death. Parker is one of them. But the case did not end there. Parker's legal team appealed. In September of 2025, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals heard arguments. Parker's attorney argued, among other things, that the prosecution had used prejudicial evidence during the trial. In November of 2025, the court issued its decision. It upheld the conviction. It upheld the death sentence. The court found, in its words, no reversible error. Taylor Parker remains on death row today. Netflix's documentary, Maternal Instinct, brings this case to a national audience. It is a difficult watch, but it does what the best of these documentaries do. It refuses to let the victim be forgotten in the spectacle of the crime. I have tried to do the same here. Reagan Simmons-Hancock was 21 years old. She was a mother to a little girl. She was weeks away from meeting her second daughter. She trusted someone she should have been able to trust. That is the center of this case, not Taylor Parker, Reagan. If this case affected you the way it affected me, leave a comment. I read them. This community's conversations about these cases are some of the most thoughtful anywhere on this platform. The next case I am covering is connected to one I have already told you about. If you watched my video on the Bardstown, Kentucky cases, the murders that have never been solved, the next episode goes deeper into a thread I left open, a disappearance that the people of that town still cannot explain. Subscribe, not for more videos, but because that specific story is one you are going to want to be here for. I will see you in the next one.